welcome to my dissertation on the topic of US-Sino Relations, titled A Look Inside an Increasingly More Hostile Relationship. The subject of inquiry of my dissertation is regarding the deterioration of US-Sino relations, particularly in the period during and immediately after the Trump administration. In order to frame the investigation in the proper context, you need to understand the history surrounding these two countries. China and the United States represent roughly 40% of the world's economy, totaling around $40 trillion in nominal GDP. They also represent the world's leading powers in terms of military spending, international trade output, and also the sheer size of their respective economies. In 2016, the United States could either embrace the nation superpowers like China and India, attempting their own globalization of world markets, or they could seek to disrupt and potentially stall this growth, thus retaining their status as the de facto economic and political hegemon. The United States under former President Trump enacted a protectionist economic stance, which turned their back on the carefully built multilateral structures in which it had so heavily relied upon for the past decades. The Trump administration sought to choke out China's development strategy plans, justifying that as a response to what they classified as unfair trade practices. In response, China imposed tariffs of its own, refusing to back down and proving that they were willing to withstand a trade war for as long as necessary. Both actors have seen a dramatic shift in their diplomatic rhetoric, accusing each other of actions that they deem insincere or downright hostile. Following a worldwide pandemic, economic recession, and rising internal tensions, the United States finds itself in a particularly unique place to redefine their foreign policy, especially seeing how the brand new administration got huge political wins in Congress in the elections of 2020. Just how these two nations will adapt their foreign policy to the changing times will be crucial to determining the future of several key areas that this author presumes will dominate the international political discussion for the years to come. Thus, this dissertation is divided in the following manner. The first chapter will serve as our introduction to the issue at hand. The first subchapter, presenting the many facets of the problem, the wide-reaching implications of the problem, as well as the diverse arenas in which these two superpowers are currently battling it out. The second subchapter dips a toe into the metaphorical and historical bond that surrounds the two. The third subchapter, however, delves into the numerous changes to their respective foreign policies that arose as a result of the souring of relations. Both states adapted to the situation in different ways, though with similar levels of intensity and urgency to their actions. The final subchapter is dedicated to recounting the copious hostile exchanges and attitudes both states adopted at a diplomatic level. By diplomatic level, I am referring to both singular, isolated comments by individuals that form a part of the nation's official diplomatic body, as well as the combined, unified official efforts of the countries to publicly denounce each other at any official channel or forum. The second chapter, however, is all about the future. Taking all of the information from the first chapter, the author explores the various possible outcomes that could result from the Trump administration's foreign policy decisions, particularly exploring the differences and perhaps surprising similarities between the past administration and the current Biden administration. Using the limited information available at the time of writing, the author explored the current administration's philosophy with regards to China. Following that, Chapter 2.2 takes a look into the challenges that stand in the way of an ideal harmonization of this relationship. Although the international community can unanimously agree that this would be the best outcome for all parties involved, either directly or indirectly, there are some concerning key issues for both nations that neither seem too eager to resolve. Cut. Compromise is the name of the game here. Swift, emotionless negotiation must take place between the two at the highest level in order for any progress to be made. And make no mistake, progress must be made. The current state of affairs is a sad reality, one in which The entirety of our international economic paradigms are in jeopardy, one in which peace and security in the South China Sea is being threatened on an everyday basis, one where human rights abuses are being committed and denied from both parties, while transparency is left by the wayside. One, perhaps most concerningly, where not even the threat of planetary extinction is enough to spur these two into action, into reconciliation. The final division of this dissertation is dedicated, perhaps foolishly, to extrapolating about the future. How will the US get China to commit to their rules-based system without compromising on issues that China deems are of internal concern, of purely sovereign national concern? How will China undertake their massive infrastructure development projects if the US and its allies are actively trying to intervene against it? How will the international system react to this burgeoning Cold War? For answers, tune in next week to your preferred method of algorithm-dominated media. Now, I'm nearing my conclusions at the time of filming, and I just realized that the whole background has remained static. That's on me. Here we have some of the most important detonating graphics that probably upset former President Trump. Here we can see how the US trade balance is in the negative zone, while China's trade balance is actually positive, and their imports and exports are actually comparable they're actually quite identical for the past 3. And this is the graph that is also unintelligible, but represents when China will overtake the US in terms of GDP. And what this graph says is when Biden won in 2020, they were representing around 70 to 75%, China was, of the US's GDP. And by 2024, which you can't see, they'll be roughly 85% of the US's GDP. So we are probably looking at a scenario where in the next 10 years, we'll probably see China with a comparable, if not identical, GDP to the US. China remains emboldened by their apparent political and diplomatic hot streak. They emerged from 2020 with the momentum on their side, having emerged as a sound ally, a stable regime in the East. However, their future ambitions are not completely irreconcilable with those of the West, particularly with regards to one of the most pressing and important international concerns for the coming years: climate change and environmental sustainability. The latter represents a vital aspect of incoming economic development strategies, and their green energy industry is actually especially well developed. Both reasons that ensure that China will continue to be a proactive participant in the international system. However, there is still room for coexistence, even in the particularly doomed region of the South China Sea. China's artificial island building and consistent militarization of the islands in the region can be seen as an interest in the resources available at the seabed, as well as control of commerce in one of the world's most important sea routes. It is not a reflection of warmongering or territorial expansion for the sake of it, but rather of their interests as a nation. The United States needs to have the military might and resolve to further dissuade a large-scale conflict in the region and protecting its allies, as well as the diplomatic prowess and delicacy needed to reach a compromise that establishes legal international boundaries that benefit everyone in the region. A tall order indeed. A commercial relationship that is worth $600 billion cannot be left by the wayside for very long. These two nations will either find a way to work out their differences in a healthy, mutually economically beneficial way, or the rest of the global economy will suffer as a result of the opposite. At least in the short term, At least in the short term, international trade will take a large enough hit to stagnate a lot of the developed economies of the world, leaving China with no other recourse but to significantly accelerate their investment in new emerging economic markets for their exports. This will eventually lead to a technological Cold War as more crucial technologies are developed between the two superpowers in the hopes of becoming the leading supplier of the world, and in fear of staying behind will motivate the other emerging markets to align with either side. This technological Cold War would be unpredictable and completely different from the one that developed in the 1960s. Those are the conclusions reached by my dissertation. Thank you for listening. I know I severely underused my visual aid, but I do hope sincerely and humbly that the graphics presented therein are more than sufficient to make up for the complete lack of waste of space. Thank you for listening again.